Hey there, my name's Niandra, and in this video I will be going over everything you need to know about Mercy's damage boost. If you are new or looking to improve your Mercy play, I think you'll get a lot from this. So generally you should be aiming for between 2000 and 3000 damage amplified per 10 minutes. Now that might sound really daunting if you get around half that, so I always recommend a gradual climb. Aim to consistently hit 1000 per 10 minutes, then 1.2k, then 1.4k, and so on until you're able to regularly hit that 2000. As for offensive beam uptime versus defensive, I like to hit a ratio of at least 60 to 70% damage boost, but I also think this stat is actually less useful than the raw number. Like, I have had matches where I've gotten 3.2k damage amplified in 10 minutes with a 50-50 ratio, and then I've had matches where I've gotten like 1.8k with a 70-30 ratio. Anyway, let's get started, and you can probably skip this first section if you aren't new to Overwatch, but why is damage boost so important? Well, in summary, supports are called supports and not healers for a reason, and Overwatch 2 places great emphasis on the importance of individual contribution. In a way, damage boost is Mercy's primary job. It's a unique aspect she brings to the table, but sadly underusing it has always been one of the most common mistakes players make, especially newer or casual ones. Let's say for example you have one team with a Mercy that doesn't damage boost and a Kiriko with low damage, but both of them have insanely high healing output. Then on the other team, let's say there's a Bap and a Moira who have half the healing but a few thousand damage each. If Mercy's team loses the match, she might be confused. She might be thinking, but I healed so much, what happened? And what you gotta keep in mind is, if you win a fight faster thanks to more damage and utility, you are probably going to be healing less. Hence why a Mercy ending a match with 26k healing and 400 damage amplified is, well, just not impressive. Now, to be fair, in mid to low ranks and casual play, Mercy's healing is very strong because it doesn't require aim and isn't tied to a resource. That being said though, when Mercy heals an ally that's already full health or anti-naded, what exactly is she contributing to the match at that given time? She isn't building ult charge and she's just not really helping her team win the fight either. But still, you see plenty of people who underuse or don't even use damage boost at all because they're just not thinking about this, they're only thinking that they're a healer. All of that being said though, at the time of this recording, you do generate less ult charge from damage boosting than you do from healing. This means a Mercy that heal bots their tank while stealing ult charge from their Ana may get Valkyrie faster than a Mercy that damage boosts their Sojourn who gets 3 picks. You should keep this in mind sometimes, especially when close to Valkyrie. I like to call this tactical heal botting, but anyway, I'll talk about this more later on. Now we know why damage boost is so good, let's move on to how it works. So, to actually enhance your allies, generally you need to be blue beaming them when they fire the damage. Say your Pharah shoots a rocket and then you damage boost it, you will be too late by that point, and this is why you sometimes hear the ticks of Ashe's dynamite when healing her, but they stop when you switch to damage boost. Things get a bit wonky when it comes to throwables though. So for heroes released during Overwatch 1 like Ashe or Reinhardt, you have to damage boost as the object is thrown, and then you will continue to boost it even if you beam someone else or switch to healing. However, with heroes released in Overwatch 2 like Sojourn and Ramattra, you can start damage boosting their throwables at any point during their lifespan, but you have to keep your beam on them to continue boosting. If you go do something else, your damage amplification is just dropped. I have no idea why this is the case, if it's a bug or if it'll change in future, or if it's just a disconnect between those that worked on Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2. In regards to Reinhardt's Fire Strike specifically, if he lands both on one unharmed enemy, it won't eliminate them, but if at least one is damage boosted, it will. That being said though, try to avoid wasting beam uptime in hopes of boosting them. For example, I've had moments where I'm holding damage boost on Reinhardt expecting him to use it and he just kind of doesn't, so I'm just standing there providing less value than if I had just stuck with a DPS. A lot of Reinhardts use Fire Strike to build ult and then use it less when they have Earth Shatter ready, so sometimes it can be worth checking the scoreboard first. What you can do with Overwatch 1 throwables is track the cooldown in your head. For example, if you damage boost Ashe's dynamite at the start of the match, then go blue beam Sojourn, you can then try to flick back to Ashe when you think she'll throw her next one. With fast enough reaction time, you can sorta multitask with this. Here I damage boost Junkrat when he shoots, do something else during the reload, and then come back. Obviously, as Mercy, it is important to keep your camera view moving to have an overview of your spread out teammates, but also be careful about damage boosting allies that can't currently do damage. Let's say I'm beaming Orisa while watching my Ana to see if she needs me. If Orisa overheats her weapon and I don't notice, I then spend a few seconds not doing anything. Bullets, beams, and melee abilities can all be boosted. As for deployables and objects, it's a bit more complicated. For example, Tracer's Pulse Bomb can be damage boost and so can Bastion's ult, but turrets cannot, with the exception of Bob, who you can boost but don't get ult charged for doing so. Here is a full list of unobvious or unclear attacks that can and cannot be damage boosted. With attacks that are an animation into damage, like Zenyatta's volley or Reinhardt's charge, you do not need to be boosting during the wind up. So with Zen, if you see him charging up, you can flick your beam onto him, then go back to what you were doing. With Reinhardt, you only need a flick just before the ally hits a wall, which is worth doing because right now I'm technically not doing anything. Damage boost also increases Reaper's lifesteal, so when he's blue beamed, he'll get more healing for doing damage. With Jungle Queen, you can increase her self-healing when she applies the wound damage. With her axe, you need to be damage boosting her for the duration of the effect, otherwise damage boost just gets removed for some reason. As for Moira, you cannot increase the health she gains back when she sucks off an enemy. Last of all, damage boost does currently stack with no cap. This means you can blue beam allies that are nano boosted to make them extra deadly. Let's look at two physical ways you can play to increase damage boost. One is called the default state technique, which I personally use and mention every other video. The second is the Skiesti method, who is another Mercy content creator that I like a lot. So the default state technique is basically where you play most of the match with damage boost held down and keep it held down when you tap the healing button. As soon as you lift your finger off the healing button, you then automatically go back to damage boost. This is great if you struggle to switch to damage boost after getting your ally to full, and also for pushing tiny flicks of damage boost when your ally is injured. The downside to this method is that it requires a lot of holding down buttons, which can be physically taxing over long periods, especially if you have hand issues and or other fatigue related disabilities. Now the Skiesti method is rebinding damage boost and healing to be the other way around. So on PC you have damage boost on mouse 1 and healing on mouse 2. The idea behind this is to ease the user into a mindset where damage boost is your primary job. The downside to this method is that it also changes the button for your pistol, which can feel a bit weird. Let's go over some general damage boost tips and how you can use it more. Beginners want to focus on damage boosting at all, and speedily switching to the blue beam when they finish healing up an ally. They should be comfortable flicking between beam states like this, because sometimes you will only be able to damage boost someone for like half a second, but those moments will absolutely add up over time. Intermediate players want to focus on treating damage boost as their primary job or default beam state. This can mostly just be eased into with the physical methods mentioned earlier and looking out for key ability usage. For the more experienced players, one of the biggest things that separates an average or good Mercy from a great one is how comfortable they are pushing damage boost when allies are injured. Another thing is knowing when to actively ignore healing other injured allies to continue damage boosting / pocketing your current targets. Like I've said this before, but if you have this mindset of all allies need to be fully healed by me before I can use damage boost, you will just never use it. Good awareness is really going to help here, so make sure you're comfortable keeping your camera view moving to keep an eye on everyone. Trusting your other support, especially when they're a hero with high healing output, will also go a long way. Let's say for example Mercy and Ashe are here, everyone else is over here, and Baptiste suddenly takes a bit of damage. Now, an inexperienced Mercy will immediately leave Ashe to help him, regardless of what's going on around her and any potential dangers. However, an experienced Mercy will have asked themselves, does Bap need my help here? If he's being dived or under pressure, then the answer may be yes, but if he was just hit by a random arrow and our Sigma shield is stable, then maybe he can just heal himself, especially if I've not seen him use his regen burst. If that is the case, I can just stay here applying pressure with my Ashe. The important takeaway here isn't my specific example, it's you being able to tailor your decisions to the matches you play by getting your brain going. This is why treating damage boost as your default job is so important, because once you understand Mercy, it is so much easier to ask yourself, when should I heal, rather than when should I damage boost. Keeping a close eye on your other support along with their health and positioning will benefit you so much. A lot of supports can't heal through barriers, but Mercy can, so it can be worth shifting your mindset when, say, enemy Winston dives or against enemy Sigma, who will often try to place his barrier behind your tank to cut their healing off. When your other support has low healing output, you can go down two routes. You can focus more on healing, or you can double down on damage boost to try and win fights fast before the lack of healing becomes an issue. Treat it as a case-by-case basis. Allies have this yellow particle effect when they're being healed, and it's really easy to notice. If you can see your Ana pumping heals into your tank, ask yourself, does that tank need both of you, or can you let Ana build nano while you pocket a DPS? A general rule you can follow to make things easier is the more your team is already winning a fight, the more you can push damage boost on injured allies. For example, here both my Echo and Hog are hurt, but I damage boost because there's just a single enemy Lucio and hey, what's he gonna do, right? Pushing damage boost can also be really strong when your ally is fighting a 1v1, especially if it's a fight already in their favour. It is also so crucial on attack to damage boost when the enemy team is trying to stall and funneling out of spawn. If you lower the time to kill, that gives enemies less time to get back. Your damage boost could literally be the difference between your team capping an objective and enemies getting back to burn the clock down further. It can be worth keeping in mind that some characters partially have blue shields for health, and shields start to regen automatically over time if they don't take damage. What I sometimes like to do is heal Zarya until she hits that threshold and then become more willing to flick the damage boost. Also remember that all supports have a passive health regen that you should be working with. As I sort of said earlier, if my other support is actively taking damage, then yeah, I'll probably help them. However, if they take just a bit of poke damage from a generally safe position, I will likely let the support passive cover it so I can keep damage boosting my current target. I mentioned earlier how you get more ult charge from healing than damage boost, right? Well, what you gotta keep in mind is if you damage boost an injured ally, then heal once pressure is eliminated, you get ult charge from both beam modes, and that's how you add up to more. You probably know that Mercy's beam doesn't disconnect instantly when her beam target is no longer in sight or range. This is useful in so many ways, but I feel like offensive usage usually gets forgotten. One thing I love doing at the start of a fight is damage boosting an ally that's going to use mobility to engage, then doing something else once the beam breaks if I don't plan to follow them. If my team has someone fast and flanky like these characters, the lingering beam can give them an extra bursty start to a fight. Just be a bit careful about giving away positions when doing this because your beam will stretch to your ally. If you have allies that are playing really pushed up and hyper aggressively, one thing I love doing is flying to them, getting my beam attached and immediately backwards GAing. Even if my beam is going to break fairly quick, a few seconds of damage boost can really make a difference. I do think newer players tend to forget that your ability to damage boost can often depend on your positioning. At the start of defense, watch out for allies looking to do quick damage towards enemy spawn doors. When attacking, look to push up with allies instead of playing on cart. On push specifically, the robot only needs one ally to move, and it doesn't get any faster with more. Because of this, I rarely find myself with the robot as Mercy. You should constantly be thinking about pushing up with allies or looking for DPS taking off angles. Last of all, if you want to practice damage boosting injured allies and pocketing in general, I actually really recommend playing Team Deathmatch. Basically, it is a low stakes environment focused on small fast fights, and Mercy is just really good in it. Moving on, who should you be damage boosting and how do you pick a target? So in general, I like to prioritize hit scan DPS with medium to long range damage or flying heroes. This means characters like Sojourn, Soldier 76, Cassidy, Ashe, Echo, and Pharah, although other heroes like Genji can be really good as well. Pocketing one ally as Mercy is perfectly valid, and although it might be boring to play, is quite often how you want to play her as long as you're not letting allies intentionally die. Generally what I do is I have a default ally, usually one of the characters just previously mentioned, who I'll default to damage boosting if I don't have something more important to do. I have always said this, but there are no bad damage boost targets, only better ones, so keep an eye on your team for key ability usage that would benefit from being boosted. Also take range into consideration. If the enemy is at a distance, you probably don't want to damage boost your Reaper sniping with shotguns. For example, here I damage boost my Niandra because he has better range than Hog, then switch to Cassidy when he comes into view. Damage boost also benefits your teammates in a few different ways which can affect your decision as well. For starters, it makes their damage burstier, which is harder to heal and lowers breakpoints. A Cassidy without damage boost takes 3 shots to eliminate a Tracer, and with damage boost takes 2 for example. This means Tracer has less time to escape and Cass might not need to reload. Secondly, your allies get more ult charge when damage boosted. Because Mercy doesn't usually require aim, you can be extra attentive with the scoreboard and use that to decide sometimes. One way you can use this is if you're running two allies who combo ultimates like Hanzo and Zarya, you can bring them in sync if one falls behind. When an ally switches hero and their ult charge gets set back, you can damage boost them to bring them up to speed. Last of all, it can be worth identifying your team's win condition and damage boosting them. For example, if both teams are running Mercy Ana with a Genji, if you damage boost him and let your Ana cover as much healing as possible, you may get Nanoblade faster than the enemy team, who could be very weak against it. Moving on, let's talk about how damage boost interacts with your tanks, who are basically super tanks now. So yeah, they are pretty good targets as long as you take their range into consideration, since it will usually be smaller than your DPSs. One thing to keep in mind though is that sometimes, in mid to low ranks especially, you have matches where your tank is just pumping damage into the enemy tank who is just pumping damage back. Like, neither of them are dropping, both are basically just feeding the other's support ults. In situations like this, damage boosting your tank can maybe be useful to confirm the elimination, especially if your team is good at focus fire, but honestly it is probably more worthwhile to pocket the DPS that are ignoring the enemy tank. If you have DPS taking off angles in an attempt to eliminate the enemy support, assisting them is likely a good use of your time. And last of all, let's talk about how damage boost interacts with your supports. As I said earlier, in 5v5 supports are expected to contribute damage and can be pretty deadly. Although you probably aren't going to pocket them, never rule out occasionally damage boosting your other support. The biggest thing to keep in mind though is that it means both supports are focused on the same thing. For example, if I'm damage boosting my Ana, who is taking pot shots at Pharah, is the rest of my team okay without any healing? And sometimes the answer is yes, especially if my Ana is able to confirm the elimination. Also, I try to push damage boost hard during my team's defensive ultimates when possible. For example, during Sound Barrier or Transcendence, we probably don't need the extra healing. And there we go, that's all from me. Damage boost is probably my favourite subject when it comes to Mercy, so I really put my heart into this one. I went all out. Please join me next week where we'll be looking at hero-specific tips. Thank you so much for watching this, it really means a lot. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe, and have a nice day.